This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones. It would appear that at the State of the Game conference in London this week, there is perhaps not as much unity as we would like to see as the French and perhaps South Africa and others line up against the South, is it Australia and New Zealand, around the laws of the game. Eddie Jones, I'm giving you a conference pass, and you are being asked about some of the changes that are in place, as the French and South Africans would say, the move to depower the scrums. Where do you sit on that particular consideration?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a north-south thing, mate. I think, that's like the old communist capitalist type breakdown. I think now, countries are always got self-interest. You go to these meetings, it's self-interest. There's very few people who can see outside of it. And I don't know if there's anyone who can, because we've all got a bit of self-interest about it. But I think, in terms of the question, I think the scrum is such an important part of rugby, and it's one of the differentiations of the game. And I think we shouldn't go anywhere to depower. I think we need to try to get it to be set quicker. And I think Ewan's made the point a number of times. I think that's possible. And it only will take the referee to be insistent on that, to do that. And that's one quick change we could make straight away.
But what about this notion of replacing scrums for incidental acts like accidental offsides or dead rucks, where you then, you have free kicks and the game moves faster? What about that fundamental change and shift to increase the amount of game time and less? You would have, therefore, less scrums.
I don't like it, mate. I don't like it. I think the scrum's there for a restart, and we should keep it as a restart of the game. I think the more you go to free kicks, the more chance we've got of a lot of kicking.
My perspective is that the scrum's already been depowered, right? Right. We've already go back 30 years, where you actually had to have technical ability up front. That's all gone anyway. So it's already been depowered in the name of safety. So you're either going to get rid of it completely, but you can't depower it anymore. Like it's over managed now, in my opinion. But so I don't agree with taking it away. Otherwise, just take it out of the game as write it off, and then you'll change the body shapes and the whole fundamentals of the game change. So I think you can't depower it anymore. And the idea of if you switch to other options to restart play, like free kicks and things like that, you got to remember the scrums are one opportunity where you get space. Like all the forwards are gathered in one spot. And that's why rugby league still keeps it in its game, even though it's not a scrum in name. Anyone's in the scrum because they don't actually scrum. But what it does is give space around the field to maybe do something tactically. And I think that's one area of the game that's starting to develop, where teams are doing better off the set play in terms of getting to that space and be able to use guys with skill advantages and speed and put them in space. That opportunity still exists on scrums. If you go free kick, everyone's just going to fan out, and you're back on the 13 versus 13 or 14 versus 14 in defence. So that's all you're going to get. Yes, it's faster, but we already know that the scrum can be done quicker. And I actually heard it on the weekend in Super Rugby. One of the Australian refs was actually saying, "Come on, let's go. Let's get the scrum done. 30 seconds. Let's get it done." So it was good to hear the referee saying that. You don't hear that. They just everyone goes for the water bottles, including the referee. So, we need to just keep the tempo of the game up. And it was. Go back and look at some video from 20, 30 years ago. The scrums were more technical and they were much faster. And therefore, when we played in the World Cup in 91 final, there was like 40 scrums. These days there's 20, less. So a lot more scrums. You just didn't notice because they were done quickly and you moved on. Mm. So it's up to the players, it's up to the referee to just keep the tempo of the game up. They don't need to change anything.
Eddie Jones?
Well, the only thing I just add to that, the charter of the game is to be a game for all shapes and sizes. And whether that's still important, that's for other people to decide. But if you depower the scrum, then just have a look at the consequence of what happened in rugby league. Mm. it'll change the players you pick. Because then why would you pick props? So then do we want a game that's everyone's the same size and shape? And it changes, it does change the charter of the game. And as I said, is that still important? If it's not, then let's get rid of it and say we don't care about that. And we're happy to go to a continuity game with no contest. And I think, if you start to do more to the scrum, the chance is that you're moving down that continuity path too much. And I think the intrinsic beauty of our game is that balance between contest and continuity. And, it's always a battle to get it right, and it's never perfect. We know the game's never perfect. We don't want a perfect game. If you want to watch a perfect game, watch rugby league, watch American football. They're structured, they're nice and neat, but that's not the game we have. Unless, again, everyone decides that's what we want to have, then let's go down that track. And it'll just be like rugby, a poorer version of rugby league. It won't compete in Australia.
Yeah, well, I think, Wales defended 27 phases the other day against Scotland. That's what the potential of rugby is. You can have that scenario versus a one-phase scenario. I think Eddie's right. We don't want to have super structured and everything's prescribed. You've got 6 tackles or 6 plays or whatever it is, and then everyone has a breather. It's not, or you get to walk back to the play. There's the continuity aspect of the players in the contest, the constant contest for possession, rucks and the like, tackle contest. That's constant in rugby. It can go on forever, as we saw in that, I mentioned the Wales game. The other thing is that, schoolboy rugby in Australia experimented with the idea of depowering the scrum and you couldn't push more than a metre. What did all the coaches do? They picked back rowers in the front row. They just started picking back rows in the front row, and all the big guys, the traditional prop physique guys, they were all playing in the seconds and thirds and fourth 15s of their school teams. Yet then they go to club football where it's different rules, and they all suddenly emerge and go on to be Wallabies, but they're playing like third 15 at school because in the end they were picking back rows in the front row, and that happened for a while because they sort of depowered the scrum.
All right. So first issue, 2 votes for don't touch it. Leave it as it is, and let's keep it as a game for all shapes and sizes. And I don't think anyone listening would argue for anything else because that is the beauty of our game. Okay, second issue, the global season. Eddie Jones, do we change? Do we move the Rugby Championship to align with the Six Nations and do our best to then be able to give players the opportunity to get that rest? And does it mean, if that happens, that Super Rugby is finished?
Well, I think for the general welfare of the players, I think the global season makes the most sense. To align everything together, be able to give the players rest time, proper rest time. I think we're running down the track of really overburdening the players. If you look at it, the season's almost become 12 months. And when we play a collision sport like we play, the importance of proper rest, pre-season training is vital. Just look at the other 2 big collision sports in the game, NFL and Rugby League, and they prioritise that. And Rugby League started to eat into that by trying to take the game, resurrect the game in the north by having consistent tours to the north. And if we don't go down the track of a global season, the welfare of the players is the most important consideration that we're not taking into. So I think it's vitally important. But it means a change. Someone's going to have to give up something. And that's the most difficult thing. And you alluded to the fact that Australia and New Zealand have to give up Super Rugby. Well, I haven't looked at the detail of that, but that would be big blow for Australia and New Zealand if that happened.
Well, certainly Rob Nichol from the New Zealand Players Association sort of put a shot across the bow of Australian rugby the other day when Phil Waugh quite reasonably said that he was going to London with an open mind. And Rob Nichol said, well, if you decide to do that, just don't expect that we'll be here when you get back. And we may, in fact, double down on the national provincial Championship, and you could be left to your own devices. So, yeah.
That might be a bad thing, mate.
Well, that's ultimately, it's exactly right. I think that could be a good thing, and I'm not sure New Zealand wants to go it alone with the size of the New Zealand economy and some of the challenges they've got around their particular, showing signs of improvement in New Zealand at the moment, but they've still got some, inflation still stubbornly high, unemployment still stubbornly high. It's a very small economy. I'm not sure that they'd want to walk away from Australia entirely. But anyway, we'll come back to that. So, Eddie Jones, just before I go to Ewen McKenzie on that, no concerns then about, or I'm sure there are concerns that you would have, but for the Australian and New Zealand players, it would mean the rugby and the Argentinian players and the South African players as well, playing test matches in the start of the year, in months like now, in February, late January. It's pretty hot in this part of the world.
Well, I think there's all those considerations, mate. There's problems everywhere. What's the biggest problem? I think you got to identify what the biggest problem is. And to me, at the moment, it's players not having proper pre-seasons and recovery because of the endless nature of the season at the moment. We go from one to the other. The Nations Cup's coming, which, economically it's probably going to be pretty good for the game. But again, it's putting more stress on the players. And I just think about if you look at it, one of the reasons Australia was successful for a long period of time, in the Super Rugby, the players, and particularly the Wallaby players, had a good 12-week preparation going into the season.
Yep.
So they're able to prepare properly for the season, get their bodies right. And now, it's bits and pieces. Yeah. It's bits and pieces. And it can't continue, mate. So all those problems are there, but what's the biggest problem? Let's fix the biggest problem. And like most things in life, you can fix the biggest problem. It sorts out a number of the smaller problems.
Ewen McKenzie.
I think the same. I think it's inevitable and has to happen. You can, and we talk about, you reel off all the games that are going on at any time of the year, Pemby, when you close the show. There's all these Gen Next games that are going on now in parallel with the Super Rugby, which is all great, but it's all more games. And Maddie and I both know, when we've been involved with the Wallabies and you go on tour, there's always the extra game that gets thrown in there to play the barbars and whatever, and that's just coffer filling games, to make a few dollars at the end of the season. But it's another game. It's 1 week less rest, et cetera, et cetera. So then the players come back late, and then we've already got countries like New Zealand resting their players in the super competition, et cetera, to try and manage all that. So everyone's got to sacrifice something. It's not just about Super Rugby disappearing. It's the top 14 runs a massive. The top 14 goes for 10 months. Virtually. So everyone's going to have to look at work out where it is now. When Test matches are played, a lot of countries don't play any other rugby when that's going on. Like the level below, everyone just stops. The club stops. So Test matches involve, the best 15, or the best 23 from each country. Maybe things can occur underneath that at the same time. But obviously then when you get to the next level down, there's a lot of teams involved, it's a bit harder. So the windows need to be created around that, and maybe the test run over the top and by doing that, you're able to create better windows for recovery and genuine break from the game and for guys to get ready for the next season and actually have a season. At the moment, there's no season. It just runs 12 months a year. And you see players playing everywhere. And in fact, now we've got these little cameos where super players are playing in Japan or they're playing in Europe for a couple of months. And so there's all this cameo stuff going on, and players are effectively playing 18 months a year. Now, you might have to manage that for the players. That's all great for the players and their back pocket. But in the end, if you're managing an asset, you've got to manage their availability in the window. You've got to actually mandate that they've got to have breaks. So it's not a matter of creating the ideal format where players are actually protected and looked after. You also got to make sure that the players and the player managers respect that they're not just trying to ride roughshod and run across the different tournaments and and destroy the whole point of having a proper a proper international season, international tournament, where the windows are protected to protect player welfare.
Okay, so 2 votes for the global season and moving the Rugby Championship to the start of the year to align with the Six Nations. Geez, boys, we're ripping through this agenda. The third,
that might be the best. That might not be the best thing, Pemby. It might matter. You've got to basically open up everyone. Everyone's got to be open-minded about it, not just pick the weakest tournament and say, "Oh, we'll just drop that out," or they can suffer or whatever. Everyone needs to have an open mind about it, and then work out what the criteria are. So you really got to start with the player. When's the best player window to have a break from the game, and then work backwards from there. They don't do that. They'll go, we can't touch the Six Nations. We can't touch this. Super Rugby. Well, no one, we don't care about that in the Northern Hemisphere, so that can suffer. Etc. Top 14, they've got their own agenda. That's fine, but everyone's going to have to do something. It can't just be one part of the world suffering. So, and then you've got to take into consideration the climate. So you've got to look at those climate windows, average temperatures, things like that, and see what's going on. There are obviously stadiums now with there are stadiums now that got roofs. There's stadiums now that you play night. Most of the games are night games anyway. So,
Very good. Eddie, you were going to say?
Andy, just a question, mate. Where do you get your information from the shape of the game? Do they put out
no,
like summaries?
No.
Of what happens?
I've been digging around, and I think this is one of the great weaknesses around World Rugby, that that there's not the transparency that there needs to be. There should be an announcement. There should have been, detailed information circulated. But no, I'm just picking this up from the different bits and pieces that I can find in different articles at different times, and I'm reasonably confident that I'm on the money that these things need to be discussed, and maybe they're all in different formats, different discussions that might be taking place. But the broad issues are the broad issues. But I would say that this goes to the maturity of World Rugby, and that there has to be far more transparency and far greater communication about what's going on, because I'm digging around trying to find this stuff rather than, why wouldn't you broadcast it live? Why wouldn't you have it live so people could watch it on a live stream, so people can see the arguments and the debate and the discussion, and there can be transparency? It's got to happen. Okay, if there are things that are commercial that need to be taken offline, that's fine. But some of these open sessions, it costs nothing in this day and age to run a camera across something and put a few microphones around so we could all participate. Rugby Unity, millions, one sport, millions of voices. That's what we're articulating or arguing for. So anyway, I'll get you a scone and a bit of cream, Linky, in the break, but we're coming to the third issue around the 20-minute red card. The trial is over. Eddie Jones, do we keep it or not?
Well, I think the whole process of yellow card and red card, as we've spoken about previously, needs to be revised. I think we need to keep more players on the field, and I don't think you can just look at the red card as an isolated issue. I think it's the whole way of, as we went back, what's the importance of the game? Do we want to keep 15 on 15? I think, again, if you look at the example of rugby league, they want to keep 13 on 13 as much as they can. So you work back from there. So that's the end in mind. If we want 15 on 15, how do we work back from there? Rather than the other way around. I don't think you can look at it as a bits and pieces, red card, 20 minutes. I think that's quite immature to do that. And I think that's probably part of the problem here. That did they start this shape of the game with the end in mind? What's the game that we want? Right, how do we work back from there? Rather than red card, this country votes for, this country doesn't. Who cares? Who cares what they vote for? It's what's important in the game, and it goes back to what we've spoken about, mate. How do we get the game together? And get the game together by having the same image of the game to start with.
Yes, which really then needs to be articulated and then needs to be communicated. So For example, there is no visibility about Mark Robinson's review, that was taken to the shape of the game. There is no, not that I can find anyway, clear articulation of, as exactly as you say, what are the propositions, what are the fors, what are the againsts, and what is the position that World Rugby is going to be putting forward. I can't. It doesn't exist. So I think that is it is such a weakness of the sport, particularly a sport that is as complex as rugby, with all the stakeholders that you have, with so much diversity and needs. And as you said before, Eddie Jones, the self-interest is going to be there. The best way to deal with that is to make it as transparent as we possibly can. So as that we can get to a compromise position, because it is going to be a compromise wherever we land. So, but anyway, Ewen McKenzie, where do you sit on the 20-minute red card? Yes or no?
It doesn't interest me greatly. I think, I think it's just that they put something in there that I think I've seen it once. I haven't seen much of the 20-minute red card being used anyway. For me, I wrote it down. I sent it to you guys the other day. The referee's got the option free kick, penalty. In my opinion, team warnings should be penalties with sacrifice and yardage. In other words, the referee marches. So if there's just repeated infringements, the referee can march and you sacrifice territory. So you make it easy for the team that's getting constantly infringed against to get up the field. Cynical players is where the yellow card exists, and if you get yellow cards, you replace the player. And foul players where the red card does its work, and same thing, you replace the player and deal with the sanctions after the game. So in other words, you're trying to keep 15 on 15 as much as possible, but there are sort of staged opportunities for the referee to manage the game. You're really adding in what he can do now. If the referee can march the team backwards, if someone speaks back to the referee, marches them 10, no one says that's a bad thing. So why doesn't he do that more often? On these, when instead of doing team warnings, he just does stuff. And then, okay, I get the idea with it 5 metres out from the line, what do you do? Well, that's when the cynical play comes in. But you've got to understand cynical play, there needs to be some intent there. And I see plenty of it, and it doesn't get dealt with. And foul play has to have some intent and some recklessness in it as well, rather than just saying, it meets the criteria. Well, what's the criteria? I go back and I read the law, and I don't see the criteria being met. And I saw that, things that happened on the weekend in that Wales game where, you can question whether that does meet the criteria. So I think we can simplify and give the referee more decision-making power with the tools that are already available.
Eddie Jones, I know you have to get away to your day job as head coach of Japan, but just quickly your views on the Ewen McKenzie tree decision there. Free kick penalty, team warning penalty, sacrificing yardage, cynical play, foul play, etc. What do you think of that articulation? To me, it makes a bit of sense and really would keep the 15 on 15 apart from that intentional and reckless and foul play, biting, kicking, gouging, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but that's
red.
That can still be dealt with someone. Yeah, that's red, but you can still put another player on the field.
Yeah.
And you deal with that person off the field. I mean, that's some individual's brain explosion. He gets punished after the game. They have a hearing and they gets punished, but the team doesn't have to be punished for someone biting someone. Or doing something stupid, like what does the team have to suffer? And what does the fans have to suffer?
Well, okay.
Yeah. If the guy's a thug, then the coach has to make a decision about whether he picks him.
All right.
That's something, and you can deal with that off the field.
Eddie, before you have to dive off, your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think just in that situation, the bloke gets sent off, right? Gets replaced. And then he goes to the judiciary. There's no watering down. He gets 6 weeks, 10,000, whatever it is, $30,000 fine. Like it's a disincentive for anyone to do that. And we don't see that anymore. Like the game is so clean. I think they've cleaned up the game remarkably well. So that's work. And the game's got that fast. So if someone does do that, has a brain explosion, then they just get punished by not being able to play games and financial disincentive to do it. And, in a professional game, that hurts people. That hurts people a lot. And that'll hurt the team because they miss the play for 6 weeks.
Okay.
And you just get on with it. I think, in principle, what Ewan's saying's right, mate.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea. And it should be investigated completely.
All right. Well, maybe it will be. Maybe it has been. So anyway, we'll see you later, Eddie Jones.
We'll never know, mate. Try to find that strategic. Have you found that strategic plan yet?
Well, Alan Gilpin is coming on the program, and I am hoping by the time he arrives here in early March that we might have that strategic plan, because I am certainly looking forward to reading it in some detail. All right, Eddie Jones, we'll let you get back to your day job.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
Hey, before I sort of came into the studio, Ewen McKenzie, you and Eddie Jones were having a conversation, and I just picked up the sort of tail end of it. What were you talking about?
Oh, we were just discussing other ways that you might play the game. Because everyone plays the game, and then a lot of teams are inherently conservative, and they follow the trends in the game and how the game's being played. Then you've got teams like South Africa that that don't mind taking a risk, and they'll go out and do something, and then people are then trying to chase them in terms of mimicking whatever the methodology is. So we were just having a quick chat about opportunities in the game and whether we think that there's something in the next couple of years that can be done. And some of the other points are that what is old is new, and what's working at the moment. If you look, I just look across the Super Rugby games I've watched and the what's happening in the Six Nations and beyond. That the teams that are putting the ball through the hands, and then using the kick pass or the cross kick or whatever it is to break up the momentum. If you put the ball through the hands, run straight, then a looping player, a Mark Ella type player who loops around and gets a second touch, has benefit. And you can see that. You saw the Hurricanes did it really well. Brumbies have been doing it. Other teams have been doing it, not as well. But if you run dead straight and you've got players that look for second touches in the attack, and then you're using the crossfield kick to break up the game a bit, what isn't working is like big cutout passes. And that hasn't worked for a while, but teams have still done it. But the defence drifts with the pass. So you throw a double cutout, the defence moves with the pass. So while the ball's in the air, the defence is moving with it. If you use every man in the line, pass, and anyone that loops around that's got the energy to get around and get a second touch, gives you potential for an overlap. But you've got to be skillful. You've got to be at the line. We saw the other day how Ireland, forwards and backs were able to play at the line with the ball. Now that's what was being done 30 years ago by the likes of Mark Ella and others. So there's opportunity from the game in the past about in terms of attack. So we're just talking about some of those things. What is old is new, and that's what some of that stuff's working. And then it's a blend of being able to use the attacking kicks that we've been talking about. You can't just use them all the time because they'll plant someone out there. But if you are using the ball and not throwing cutouts and using their hands, and you've got to run straight though. If you run sideways, you run into the sideline. If you run straight, you'll hold the defence, and then any guy that can get around the corner, Argentina are quite good at doing it, you can get numbers and get into space. And the kick doesn't have to be a crossfield kick. The kick can be the grubber from the outside centre position, the grubber through with the winger chasing. So you've got two options there. You can kick in behind. And a lot of that's some of the, we've seen rugby league do these sorts of things. They don't do so much of the runaround plays and things like that, but that's stuff that's been done in union because there's a bit more space, a little bit more space, not a lot. So you have to be able to play with the ball at the line, and that requires skill. So, So we were just talking about some of the opportunities going forward, maybe for teams that have got that skill level. I think we see it with Italy and some of the sides. It definitely. There's more skill being used to be able to make the attack work. Wingers are coming back into vogue as try scorers. So, we see that in all the teams rather than just relying on, we've watched 3 years of driven line-outs, kick for touch, line-out maul, drive it over the line, hooker's the highest try scorer in the team. That's what we've watched for the last 3 or 4 years. Now the wingers are back in vogue.
Actually, while we're on Ireland in particular, I took a bit of stick during the week online that we didn't focus enough on Ireland's performance against England, nor perhaps Ireland's performances throughout the entire of the Six Nations. So, and I did say to the third voice, to those who pulled me up, I said, listen, I'll get Ewan and Eddie to sort of examine or to analyse Ireland in a little bit more detail in what you've seen so far. So what is it that you've liked about the way the Irish have played, particularly the performance against England?
You got to compare the first game against France, and then you compare the England game. You say, what was the difference? Well, the capacity in the air the capacity to retrieve the ball in the air was massively different compared with the first game. They had different personnel, and you got to remember. So there's some confidence that goes with that. They're traditionally been a very good and abrasive, aggressive side. Didn't see that as much in the first game. Definitely saw it against England. They led the charge there. They were thirsty, hungry for the physical encounters, because as we flagged, we thought England might have maybe selected a bit wrong, and England weren't able to get on the front foot, and therefore playing on the back foot, the kicking game wasn't so they're able to stifle the kicking game by keeping England on the back foot. So they do all the physical things really well. And my question over the last period of time is where they were on the mountain. I've said that a bunch of times, but clearly they're not finished. But you got to look at the first game, and then you look at the England game, and there's a big difference. Okay, difference in personnel, so that helps. There's a lot of experience, a lot of combinations were back, but they also played a different 10, and they just got stuck into the game, and England weren't there. England weren't able to compete physically, and then in the attacking side of the game, they were able to play at the line, which surprised England and caught England out, and they made a lot of line breaks and the like. So there's not much in it. It's subtle. They didn't have their own way at scrum time. Lineouts are all right, but in the end, the difference was in the physical exchanges around the paddock and the desperation to get up and do it again, and that goes to intent. And that was there against England, but it wasn't there in the first game. So you can only look at what's there. You can't. We can't sort of pretend that it didn't happen. It didn't happen against France. It definitely happened against England. So the next game's probably a good pointer, but they're still a force. You can't underestimate them, which is a good thing. You want the more competitive teams, the better. But they got a way they play, and they were able to impose themselves on England. They weren't able to impose themselves on France for they did for 20 or 30 minutes, but not across the whole game.
All right, so we'll leave that conversation, that discussion about Ireland. But during the week, some statistics fell off the back of a truck and found their way into the Rugby Unity office, and it was their comparative statistics between the 2025 Six Nations when lined up against the 2025 Super Rugby Pacific tournament. I just want to take you through each of these statistics, these comparative statistics, Ewen McKenzie, and get your views. So, Six Nations versus Super Rugby Pacific. More points and tries in Super Rugby Pacific. Six Nations, 49 points and 6.6 tries per game. Super Rugby Pacific, 58.4 points and 8.4 tries per game. Super Rugby Pacific is clearly higher scoring and more try heavy, and slightly more ball in play time in the Six Nations. Six Nations, 39 minutes and 12 seconds ball in play. Super Rugby Pacific, 37.36 minutes ball in play. So the Northern competition actually has ball in play longer, despite scoring less. We've been saying for some time that perception and reality often diverge in rugby. The data says that Six Nations isn't slow. It's just less, perhaps ruthless in try scoring than Super Rugby. What does that tell us about perhaps the way the teams are being coached and the way that they're approaching the games?
I don't know if you're probably better comparing the Premiership or something with the Super Rugby than say Six Nations. Six Nations obviously it's test matches. They're test matches, and they're sort of played in it's a tournament, but as we know, it's a short tournament, and so you're playing with less. There's less opportunities, so you're going to be inherently you got to get it right. You haven't got a chance to take a breather. Super Rugby, the games are skewed by New Zealand rest some of their players, and it's a longer tournament, so you have injuries and things like that to deal with. So it's a different thing, and it's also it's a level below Test Rugby. So you've got the difference between the best and worst player in a Super Rugby squad is different to what it is in a Test squad. So, but in terms of the trends in the game, I'm not surprised by the point scoring. That doesn't surprise me. Ball and play, Six Nations ball, that probably surprises me. It's only subtle difference there. It surprises me. Kicking, not surprised that they kick more. In the end, statistics, I think Bruce McLean, my friend from New York, he said something about statistics like bikini. It's what it doesn't show that's important. So I don't see the kicking is a bit type of kicks that matter there. So I'm not seeing a lot of difference. But we've said that kicking, the teams that kick the most tend to win. So that probably stands out in the statistics there. They're pretty similar. Mauls and rucks, same. I don't. There's not a lot to glean out of those statistics. Discipline, I'd be more interested in the cards. The discipline side of it is penalties. You got 20 versus 22. So what does that tell you? Not a lot really, because the sample set's different. The Super Rugby, there's a lot more games, so you're going to get a lot more, and there's a lot more disparity between the teams and also between the ability of the players within those teams than it is in a test match scenario. So we need to break some of those statistics down, the kicking stats, and have a look at if there's anything meaningful there. We can pour over stats till we're blue in the face. I don't think it's telling us a great deal, other than maybe the Six Nations is a bit more dynamic than the Southern Hemisphere thinks. And on the inverse, Super Rugby is not as free-flowing as probably what they think in the Northern Hemisphere, loose and free-flowing. In fact, that the statistics show that actually they're relatively even, is what I would say.
So one of the things we are exploring here at Rugby Unity is the opportunity to get access to meaningful statistics on a weekly basis, so as that we can actually draw out statistics that are meaningful and that there are a meaningful comparison. I take your point, comparing Six Nations and Super Rugby, is not probably as valid as some of the other comparisons, but these were the statistics that arrived. But I do think that the third voice is very interested in the technical aspects of the game. So we are going to try to find a way to get relevant statistics and be able to each week be able to perhaps look at, with the help of some analysts, these are the trends in the game.
I go to the World Rugby site, and they always have the match centre, and you go through. If people want to do this, you can go and you can look at the stats for the games. They'll give you a direct, and so you're looking for stats that are not comparable, therefore might be meaningful in terms of the outcome of the game. But you also have to look at the game in terms of the timeline. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. I look at the score. If I haven't watched the game, I look at the score. I go back. I can look at the stats. That'll tell me something. But you have to look at the timeline, because you got to see where the yellow cards are and the discipline aspects are, and that's where you'll find that you've got the 14-on-15 scenario, and that's where you'll see where the tries are scored. And they're scored in those windows. I mean, Wales scored a try under yellow. They were under yellow card and they scored a try. That's very rare. I think Scotland got a couple on the inverse. So it matters where the yellow cards are in the game, and so that, for instance, so you got to look across the whole thing and try and put it together. But there's some good stats there on general stats, but in terms of comparing competitions, we've got to break the kicking stats down into whether they're attacking type kicks or defensive kicks, just meters. Kicking meters is important. It's all about the kick contest, really. So statistics around that. How many times you put the ball up versus how many times you get it back. Like if you kick the ball up in the air, and that's my disappointment with Super Rugby at the moment, is they'll do the box kicks that we're used to at Test football, but the kicks always go too far, or they're not chased properly, and therefore it's just a turnover in possession. The other team catches it uncontested, and then they've got the ball. So for me, that's a turnover. If you contest it, you're a chance of getting it back. How often do you get it back? I think I saw some stats around 9%, 10%. So for every 10 kicks, you get one back. Well, that's a KPI that you can work on to try and get more. And that gets to the quality of the kick and the quality of the chase. The kick's only as good as the chase. So, that's where you're going to delve into the detail of the stats. How many times you get the ball back when you kick it? So it's got to be it's contestable kicks versus territory kicks. So you got to break those numbers down.
All right. Well,
they'll be there somewhere. Someone will have them, but it's a question whether you want to pay for them or not.
Stand by. The third voice. We are looking always to try to improve the experience of the program, and it's something that people are interested in, as is. There were a number of questions. I think it was last week maybe or the week before. There was a shot of Eddie Jones' bookshelf in his office, and they were trying to pick the books that he reads, because he is an absolute voracious consumer of books. And so we're going to have another segment introduced into the program called Eddie's Book Club. And, what's the book that he's reading at the moment? And he did actually send it through to me, and I don't have my phone with me, but I might get Chris, our producer, to give us the book of the week for Eddie's Book Club. So Stan,
it won't be a rugby book. It'll be some other sport.
No, it's exactly what it is. Thanks, Chris is grabbing it, and here it is for this week. So this is Eddie's the first of Eddie's book club. Play like you mean it. Passion, laughs, and leadership in the world's most beautiful game. Rex Ryan. No football fan will want to be without the book that delivers pure, unfiltered Rex Ryan, head coach of the New York Jets, and one of the most popular, outspoken, well-liked and widely respected personalities in the National Football League, the NFL. Rex Ryan is known for his exuberance, and Play Like You Mean It explores every aspect of Ryan's amazing passion for the game of football, plus the lessons he's learned in leadership and motivation during his years in and around the game, in his own words. So there you go, people. That is the Eddie's Book Club book for the week. And, he burns through the content, does Eddie Jones. He works well into the evening most nights, and that's when he does most of his reading. So, to the third voice, thanks again, people, for your contributions to the program. It does help, and thank you all for your comments on the various social channels as well. We really had another huge week this week, so please keep building that community, keep having your say, because people are listening and they are watching. So anyway, Brett Cameron on Spotify. Guys, great job. Ewen often says he wants to read up on the rules to understand a particular interpretation. Have any of his readings deciphered why all halves can feed the scrum into the number 8? So you've spoken about this before, about the law that says you've got to put it in the middle, but the refereeing is...
Well, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to put it in the middle, and then in the ruck, you're allowed to play the ball with your hands and roll it back to the back of the ruck. There's all sorts of things you can do as a halfback that don't line up with the rules. So, that's my bugbear. There's a lot of rules there that just don't get interpreted, when other ones, the croc roll and things like that, sort of thrown around, and you go, was that really what it was meant to be for? Like, I think, I have been reading the rules just to educate myself.
The laws.
And I'm surprised at the laws, and I'm surprised how open to interpretation they are. and how some of them are quite specific. Therefore, the circumstances in the game don't necessarily line up. So when they say, oh, it meets the criteria, I'm going, what's the criteria? I'm looking for the criteria, and some of it's vague and some of it isn't. So, so it's sad that I've got to go back and look at the laws because that's what the game drives me to do. I need to understand what's going on because I get confused.
Yeah, I still think there's real validity to Eddie Jones's suggestion that was made very early in the Rugby Unity program about putting together a global high-performance team of referees who work for World Rugby. They're not aligned to their particular country, and they just work, and they're the one, and they work together just like they do at Rugby World Cup, because I think that's where you'll get that consistency week in, week out, and I know they try to do it at the moment, but I do think a full-time, just like they have in cricket, it's exactly the same in cricket.
Yeah.
They have a group of umpires who travel the world, and I do think rugby will get there someday. So anyway, on to the next thing, and this is in relation to the Henry Arundell's red card. Kevin Harris on TikTok said, a referee friend of mine suggests going back to the earlier rules where there was a requirement or the laws for the catcher to have both feet on the ground to catch a high ball. Certainly stops all the arguments and all the risk. What do you think, Ewen McKenzie? Should players have to stay on the ground to contest, or
I can see the merit on that in terms of cleaning up the area, but I don't know that if it's a contest, part of the contest is you've got to get above, you've got to be able to go up and catch the ball. So that's where I'm concerned because there's too many things to watch. You have to, in the end, you can only go to intent. You can only go to intent, in my opinion. So if people are contesting the ball, they can't watch the other person and watch the ball. All they can do is watch the ball. So for me, if the people contesting the ball are watching the ball and only watching the ball, whether they jump or not, that's what they're doing. They're contesting for the ball and they're only focused on the ball. So therefore, for me, there's no cynical or intent involved. So therefore, you can't get to the yellow card. Doesn't matter how bad it looks or whatever. The intent was to catch the ball. So it's when they don't look at the ball and they just run at the man, and then the guy gets cut. Well, that's when there's not an intent to compete for the ball, and therefore you're into the foul play territory. So I think they've got to spend more time looking at what all the people. There could be 5 people contesting for the ball. If they're all looking at the ball and trying to catch it, that's all they can do in the game. Can't do anything else. So you can't get sent to the bin for doing that.
I agree. Craig Basford on Spotify. Could we enforce a situation like ice hockey where a yellow card player comes back on after 10 minutes or a team scores at least 5 points in a power play?
No, you could do that. Yeah, you could do that. That's just more. There's more off-field management to go with that, and then you've got a power play now because you've got 15 on 14. So and sometimes it's 15 on 13. So you've got a power play opportunity. I don't think that's the answer. It just gets down to I think that the sanctioning, particularly the foul play stuff, has to be dealt with off the field. Yellow card, I think territory is a good way of sacrificing. I know everyone's going to write in and say, oh yeah, but what happens if it's 5 metres out from the goal line? Well then, if you get repeated infringements like we do now, then you do have to go to the cynical. You have to say, you've been warned, I've marched you back to the goal line, and if you're still going to do stuff, I'm going to put you in the bin for cynical play, but you can bring someone else on. So we're still playing 15 on 15. And if you accumulate yellow cards on that basis, then you're going to be into the red card. You're going to have to deal with a bunch of yellow cards. I think Lewis Liner, he's had 2 now in 2 games. So what happens to him? Does he get something for his so-called infringements, which I don't necessarily think are cynical? They're stupid, but maybe not cynical. And one of them was stupid, and the other one I don't think was a problem. So,
All right, so the rugby analyst on YouTube, a frequent commenter, so thank you very much. And also I'd mentioned the Thai on YouTube as well for your compliments. Thank you very much, the Thai. But Rugby Analyst says the law that Ewan was talking about adding players to the ruck is just in Super Rugby as a trial. For me, I don't.
Okay. Well, there you go.
I don't think it makes a difference, as it actually encourages teams to slow down the game even more by setting up another caterpillar ruck nearby before getting a better angle at the exit. As long as they police the 5-second use it rule and count down from 2, I'm personally happy. So what do you think about the Rugby Analyst?
Yeah, I agree. That's the problem you have when you watch across different tournaments. Yes, I forgot that was a Super Rugby trial rule. So, yes, I agree.
Okay.
I agree. Teams will find a way, and you see it now. You see teams doing set-up plays in the 22, so they don't want to cross the line. So they'll literally pass from the ruck infield. The guy just drops on the ground to create a ruck, so they give better angle for the halfback to kick the ball out without crossing the 22 metre. So you already see the set-up plays that he's talking about. So I agree with what he says. I think they use it in the 5 second. That's more important. So try and keep the tempo of the game going.
Now, we do have more questions, but we do have other things to get to as well. But as always, a big thanks to all of you out there as the third voice. One sport, millions of voices. And I do think that if we can continue to encourage the engagement, the discussion, we will continue to make progress. Because I do think that a lot of the debate, the discussion that we've initiated as part of Rugby Unity over the last 8 months has started to make some sort of impression on people who are in positions of power and the ability to make decisions. So if you want to participate in the future prosperity of the game, if you want to make a contribution, please comment, share, give us your ideas, and we'll continue to present those. And so to the others who have asked questions, we'll come to those next week as well. So another innovation that we're going to bring you at the end of the Six Nations is what we're calling the Big Three. Now, we have some very clever people working here at Rugby Unity and deploying artificial intelligence. We are going to be producing a weekly digest of all that is the most popular content about rugby union from around the world. So our agents are working hard on gathering the best information either on social media or from the media. And what we want to do with the Big Three is bring it to you. So there is basically a digest that you will be able to subscribe to off our Substack, where you will be able to see everything that is going on in rugby that is the most popular content surfaced from around the world. So we'll keep you informed about that opportunity to get involved with the Big Three. But we do think that is great utility, because then you won't have to bother going anywhere else, because the Rugby Unity agent has been hard at work finding that information for you. So that's a good initiative, Ewen McKenzie, and certainly a valuable initiative for people who love the game.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, because, to be able to articulate what are the three most what's everyone talking about in world? In this week of rugby? What's everyone talking about? What's the three most important things that people are finding in rugby? And I'm interested to know what they are. It could be something happening in South Africa, or it could be the World Cup. It could be a bunch of things that we don't think about, because we all see it from our own perspective. So I'm looking forward to that.
No, great use of the technology, and so looking forward to sending that through to you, the third voice, and looking forward to your feedback as always. So on rugby news, obviously Andy Farrell, talk that the Irish Rugby Union perhaps are going to have to work harder to retain him. Although I did notice just before we came in that Saracens have said that they have not made any offer to Andy Farrell to return to the club that he played under Eddie Jones at all those years ago. But Ewen McKenzie, these types of stories float around often, sometimes as negotiation tools, perhaps to be able to get more
That's what you pay your manager to do, to plant stories like that, to create the market and create and inflate your price. So, like he's got outstanding coaching resume, so he'd be getting top dollar wherever he went. But I think it's a matter of job satisfaction. Yeah. So, if you do find in coaching that there's a period of time. And sometimes you can anticipate that, or the decisions get made for you. But I don't think he's at that point. But he probably is at a point where Ireland's going to be transitioning a lot of the players that he's been, the custodian of for a bunch of years now. So it's whether he's excited by that and whether he wants to do another bunch of years and bring on the next generation or whether he feels that that's too much. It's a valid question for him, but I'm sure his agents will be seeing what's out there, because something different might be enough to stimulate him. But I'd be surprised if he dropped back into being a test level to drop back in. It's a different sort of environment. Maybe that's one that might suit him, a club where you sort of get to go home at night. You're not on the road as much, and you've just got that predictable year. So I guess that's possible, but I think he'll stay with Ireland for sure.
Stephen Larkham, some speculation that the New Zealand Rugby Union are interested in him becoming a part of their coaching setup. Certainly an interesting article as well, and perhaps his agent's been hard at work as well, because I know he is in discussions, but I don't know. I can't see Stephen Larkham leaving the Brumbies anytime soon. What do you think, Ewen McKenzie?
I think that I think that he's been at the national level before as assistant coach, and then he got sort of unceremoniously exited there. And then he went over to Ireland, and so he's had some experience overseas. I think he suits the Brumby land. I think he suits that. I think he'll bide his time and play the real long game, and hopefully a Wallaby opportunity comes for him, somewhere down the track. I think he'll play the long game and try and build some success there. I mean, the Brumbies have had a lot of success, but there's some opportunities to do a little bit better than just finals. So I think he'll be looking at that. And he's got Ben Moen there assisting him, doing a great job. A lot of communication with him over the last couple of years. He's doing a really good job there. So I think that as a team, that'll be exciting times, and I think he'll stick with that. I don't see him jumping to New Zealand. I don't think they're going to offer him the head coaching job, so it'd be in a sort of an assistant capacity. I think he's done a lot of that. So I think he'll stick with the head coaching job and maybe wait for the Wallaby job to come down the track.
In other news, Alex Mitchell, the English half, James Lowe, the Irish winger, and the Italian fullback, Ange Capuozzo, they're all out of the rest of the Six Nations, injured, which is a pity, all high-quality players. And Louis Bielle-Biarrey, he is my favourite player. Became the first player to score in 8 consecutive rounds of the Six Nations. He is at that red headgear. He's just an excitement machine, and I just love watching him play.
Well, I said the wingers are back, and he's been able to find opportunity without much help. But now he's got Dupont and others. They're just feeding him opportunities to be able to use his speed and get into space, and he's very clinical at finishing. So, they've got an asset there that they're playing to. Yeah. And you've got to remember that the start of the season, Galtier was getting criticised for not picking Penno. Yeah. But has anyone mentioned his name since? Now, the other winger's pretty tidy as well. Like, he's been doing good things too. So no one's mentioned the other guy. So that's what happens. There's a couple of young guys are kicking on and converting the opportunity. So that's how it works. So good on Galtier to sticking to his guns, and he's still got those guys in reserve anyway if he needs it.
There's no rugby in the Rugby Europe Championship. Again, another favourite competition of Rugby Unity. But so far in the 2026 Rugby Europe Championship, the pool stage has seen Georgia and Portugal flex with big wins. Georgia 61-12 over the Netherlands. Portugal 68-12 over Germany. While Spain have started strongly, and newcomers Switzerland, they've taken some heavy defeats, but then they stunned the Dutch by defeating them by 29 points to 23 last weekend. So, and there's been a couple of upsets as well, not only Switzerland's historic first ever win over the Netherlands, but also that famous victory, Germany, 30 points to 24 over Romania. And as I say, no matches this weekend, but it's all heading towards the championship finals in Spain on the 15th of March, where the 5th and 7th place finals will be played. The 3rd place and the championship finals will also be played over one weekend on the 15th of March. Great initiative. And so what a weekend that would be to be there to enjoy all of those matches in Spain. So I'm sure everyone listening in that part of the world get across to that weekend of the 2026 Rugby Europe Championship finals in Spain. The Rugby Europe Trophy, that season has resumed its second-year cycle with 6 teams: Czechia, Croatia, Denmark, Lithuania, Poland and Sweden. And again, they battle for promotion to Rugby Europe Championship. So far in 2026, the competition narrative is that Sweden and Poland are setting the pace in the promotion race on the back of strong recent form, while Czechia, Denmark, Croatia and Lithuania have been scrapping for positions in mid-table because they certainly don't want to slip further towards relegation. So matches this weekend: Croatia plays Poland. Croatia are 4th on the leaderboard with on the table with 1 win and 2 losses. Poland 2nd with 2 wins and 1 loss. Czechia are taking on Lithuania in Prague at the Marketa Stadium. Czechia currently 1st with 3 wins and no losses. Lithuania have not won as yet. And there's a match in the women's game between Germany and Finland. There's only 3 teams in that competition. That's Germany, Finland and Sweden. And Sweden currently and on a top place in the women's game there. So in Super Rugby this weekend, Moana Pacifica taking on the Force, the Reds taking on the Highlands, the Drua against the Hurricanes, the Chiefs against the Crusaders, and the Brumbies take on the Blues in Canberra on Saturday night. Max Jorgensen is the standout at the moment as the Super Rugby Pacific Player of the Year after 2 rounds. But Charlie Cale, the Brumbies back rower, is on his tail. Ewen McKenzie, early days, but who do you like for the Player of the Year in Super Rugby? Jorgensen is a sensation, but Charlie Cale, he is a special player as well.
Yeah, it's like Cale's really physically improved, and that's when he came in. He was fairly lightweight. Then he got injured, and then now he's back, and he looks very athletic, and he is very athletic and very skillful. And so he can read the game. He's got, he's tall, lanky. He's like a Dutoit type player, not as heavyweight, but he's got that sort of potential, but he's got a high skill level. So very exciting. And Jorgensen, he can look. Everyone obviously saw him create tries last week, but he also made a few errors too. But he's got that ability to score a try a game. I think the commentary said that. So no, that's how I think about him. He's a try for you every week if you can get him the ball. So I think that the good thing is that the game's heading that way, that people are finding ways to get the wingers back in the game. It's not just relying on kicking to the sidelines and driving over mauls. So that's good for the Jorgensens, and it's good for skillful players. So I think that's one area of the game that we need to be rewarding. Where high skilled players need to be able to do that. We've seen Pollock's contributions in games later in the games. It wasn't so effective at the start of the game, but generally speaking, later in the games, as high skilled players, they are exciting to watch, and the fans like that. And I think that's a real point of difference to see people able to express themselves that way and make the game up. And Cale's definitely one of those guys. So he's looking good for there's a real good prospect for the Wallabies in the next few years, I think.
No doubt. Hey, just a final question before I let you go. Joseph-Aukuso Suaalii, obviously a player of immense ability, but there's been some criticism that we're still not seeing the best of him, and whether or not 13 is his best position. He is a stunning athlete, a very talented rugby player. But where do you sit in the assessment of Joseph-Aukuso Suaalii?
It's difficult to know. I mean, I don't know the guy. It just seems that there's a bunch of coaches that keep putting him back at 13. There's every opportunity to try him on the wing or try him at fullback, and they haven't. So all I can assume is that the skill set he's got doesn't match. Maybe he doesn't have a kicking game. We don't know. He doesn't appear to have an extensive passing game, but he's obviously a wonderful runner, and he's very good at being able to get the ball away, offload, that type of game. So I don't know. We don't know enough because he's just been played in one position and we haven't seen much around that. It's been individual moments of brilliance more than anything else that I've seen across so far. So, but he's very competitive, and he doesn't mind the physical part of the game. So all I can assume is that he probably doesn't have the skill sets to suit those other positions because different coaches have still chosen to put him at 13. So we'll see if someone wants to try something different. And we've seen those sorts of decisions made in the past. Rob McQueen, Stevie Larkham was
He was a halfback.
a too tall, lanky halfback when he joined the Brumbies, and so he went to 15 and
13. He
and
started
then
at
10.
outside.
So
He started at outside centre and then to fullback.
That's right, 13. Then he went to fullback. He was world class at fullback, and then he went to 10. So it was a journey to get to 10. So being able to move people around is as much about whether the coach wants to get that done and has the vision, and they've also got the complementary skill sets. I mean, you wouldn't have thought his body shape playing at 10, but in the end he loved taking the line on. He was tall, but he wasn't solid, no. But he didn't mind taking the line on. He was very physical for his body. So he was able to adapt. Whether they want to be brave enough to try Suaalii and try that in different positions, I don't know, but no one seems to want to do it for whatever reason. Maybe they haven't got anyone else. I don't know, but there's something there that I don't know because I'm not there.
Fair enough. All right. Well, listen, Ewen McKenzie, thank you so much for joining us once again for this week of Rugby Unity. And to you, the third voice, thanks again. As I say, we had another monster week this week, and a big thanks to all of the media organisations around the world who are strip mining our program every week and taking the quotes. But to all of you, thank you for giving us the attribution because it does help the program to be discovered. So long, you are welcome to mine us as much as you like because it does help the program to be found, and we'll hopefully continue the conversations really around the mission of the program, which is quite simply to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And again, to the third voice, your input to that is absolutely essential. So please comment, share, like, subscribe, participate in the conversation, and let's continue to have these discussions as we shape the future of this wonderful game that we all know and love and enjoy. So until Monday, please, people, be kind to each other. My name's David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.